What is up, everybody? Welcome to Sales Stories in Real Life, episode 11. Today, we have a very special guest. He's a senior associate at ClozeLoop, where he is a full cycle seller and sales trainer. Welcome to the show, Dan Berger. I hear you have a dog in the background as well. I hear you had
That's
some
Shrek.
I hear there were some pretty interesting takeaways when you were buying some ski equipment. What happened there?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks so much for having me on the show. When I saw you post that you were getting involved with this, I mean, there's people that always start a podcast, then you see someone you're like, I love their content. I've seen what you do, how you interact. So I was really excited that you're doing this and real happy to be here. But yeah, I started snowboarding probably going on about 10 years ago now, 8 years ago. And you think you're going to go and you're going to buy a bunch of equipment, and that's not how it happened because I didn't know what I was doing, right? So it was a real interesting experience. I had a friend that worked at this ski shop in my hometown, and he said, listen, I don't know about snowboards, but you're going to go and talk to this person. So I went in and talked, and I expected that it'd be me looking at a board with cool designs and boots and all this research. And 18, 20-year-old Dan did not like due diligence or research. I wanted someone to make it really easy for me, but I also, was going to ask a lot of questions. And it was after the holidays, so I had a chunk of change, and I really wanted to get into this thing that all my friends were doing. So I go into the shop, and I go up to the guy, and I'm like, listen, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you help? And I'm expecting this guy to, see his eyes light up and point me to the most expensive thing on the rack. But immediately, and this is of course before I know how to sell or I have any formal selling experience, this guy starts asking me questions. He's like, yeah, so talk to me, like, have you skied or snowboarded before? Do you play other sports? What's your balance like? How tall are you? How much do you weigh? He starts going into all these questions that I really wasn't expecting. And I'd answer the questions, but then it was things like he started diving deeper. He was things like, okay, well, listen, how frequently do you plan on going? I thought, well, that's weird. Why does that matter? Or where are you going to be riding? Oh, I didn't know that mattered. Yeah, there's different atmospheres, different types of snow, different types of terrain. Are you going to be going off 40-foot jumps? You're going to be flying through the woods, man. I mean, what's your deal? So I had to think about it. He had to help me come through the process of realizing even how I wanted to ride down a mountain, what mountains I wanted to ride on. And what really struck me as interesting here was when he said, okay, I think I've got a pretty good idea. Sounds like you're going to go a lot. Normally when a beginner comes in and they buy a setup, it lasts them for 3 or 4 years until they get to that intermediate level. But from what I'm hearing from you, it sounds like you're going to go a lot and you play sports. Do you think you might, progress a little bit faster? And in hindsight, this is clever because, a young egotistical kid's like, yeah, of course I'm going to progress faster. Who do you think I am? But like, I don't want to say, no, I'm not. So where I would have expected someone to say, well, here's what you should get, but you should come back in a year and, get your next setup. He didn't do that. And this is suddenly where, we built rapport, but where I trusted him. He said, listen, I don't want you to waste your money or your time, but I need to warn you. If you jump straight to an intermediate, or dare I even say an advanced setup, you're going to have a tougher time with the learning curve. Do you think you can handle that? And I went, of course I can, because I was, 18, 20 years old, however many years ago it was. And I thought I could take over the world. And as soon as I said that, I realized he had me. Not in a bad way, because he was constantly, he said, well, then listen, an intermediate setup is a little bit more expensive, but then he price anchored. He said, but of course, not nearly as expensive as buying 2 whole setups over the course of 2 to 3 years. So if you're willing to take a steeper learning curve, and if you're willing to, fork up a little more out of pocket today, what you could do is actually put yourself a few years ahead and have a setup that's going to last you, years to come. Spoiler alert, I still have this setup in my garage works fine. The only reason I don't use it is because I've gained about 50, 60 pounds since then. And frankly, a board doesn't care how tall you are. It cares how much you weigh. It's just not practical for me to use. But as soon as he said that, I said, oh, this guy isn't trying to separate me from my money. He's trying to build a lifelong customer. I'm going to come here to get my board serviced instead of at the mountain. I'm going to come here for repairs. I'm going to come here for my next thing. If I see something I like online, I'm going to come here and talk to them and get their opinion. He had me. I didn't realize these things at that time, but I just thought, why would I want to do business with anyone else? Or how would I even go online and do business without talking to someone like you? I mean, that just seemed ludicrous to me. It didn't stop there, though. He had asked all these questions and he hadn't shown me a single board. He actually said he saved this part for last, which was weird to me at the time. He said, well, okay, let's talk about boots, right? So we got to look at these types of boots. What's your budget there? Boards can range in these price ranges. Okay, by the way, new beginners, they spend a lot of times, falling and getting up. How resistant are your gloves? No, not how warm are they? How durable are they? It reminded me of a time that I had actually ripped, the first time I went, I had ripped open a pair of gloves. They filled them with snow. I'm like, man, this guy, it's like he's talking to my soul. He knows what I've been through. We went through the boots, the bindings. He said, these don't matter as much. You'll be fine getting away with these. You need these gloves. What does your jacket situation look like? That's good for this type of situation. Are you planning on going anywhere like here? Okay, you can hold off on that. I mean, he really took into account what I had, what I needed, what I said my budget was, which I went way over because he did a great job at selling, and brought me through the whole thing. Then, and I don't know, anyone who's ever had skis or snowboards would probably, you may agree with me, I think the coolest part, the aesthetic piece, at least at that time, was the board or the skis themselves. So we worked backwards to the most exciting and the most expensive part of the purchase, because he'd already found things I loved: the bindings, the boots, a jacket, gloves that he had put in my hands. I didn't want to put them down. I didn't come in planning to buy those, but now I didn't want to give them up. But all of these things would be absolutely freaking useless to me without a snowboard to ride them down the mountain on. So then we get to the board and he goes, we could do these. We could do these. And then he gets this glint in his eye and he goes, do you like blondes or brunettes? And I went, what? He goes, I'll show you something cool. We just got it in today. Now there was this line of boards, and it might sound a little much now, but it was called the Burton Custom X. And what it did is it took basically a picture of, some model, and then it blurred it out. So from a distance, you couldn't really tell that it was a human figure. But if you looked closely, or if someone explained it to you, it was. And, again, 18, 20 years old, I went, blondes. And he goes, okay, we got this one right here. It actually just so happens to be in the size range that I was telling you about, which he told me the size range ahead of time. So I didn't think he was full of crap then and there. He had already told me the size board I need.
Right.
And he goes, and the blue background of it actually happens to match with the gray pants you picked out and the blue jacket. We could even switch the bindings out. Those are green. We could switch those for blue ones that'll match this. Come here. Let's put it together. Let's show you what this setup looks like. Now that was a critical piece, because it went from him originally doing discovery and asking questions and building rapport and making sure I had the autonomy to opt into everything that was going on. In the later stages of this sale, and this is only over the course of 45 minutes of an hour, he became very consultative, very prescriptive. Let's do this. Come here. Let's put this together. He then guided me across the finish line. He painted the perfect picture of what my mountain experience would be like with my buddies who are doing this cool thing that I've got FOMO for, and I'm going to be a part of it, and I'm going to go travel the world and ride all the coolest mountains. And he helped be so prescriptive that in my mind, I had to cross the line at this point. I mean, I was already imagining what my next ski trip would look like with my friends. He helped me put it all together. he said, listen, people try and do this themselves. They don't want, you shouldn't, but I'll put it together for you. But let me show you how I'm doing it so that you can adjust. I mean, it was a soup to nuts, white glove service. But the only time I felt like he was really leading the sales process and not me was at the end when he got very prescriptive. Let's put this together. Let's get you measured. Let's find your stance. You know what? Let's do a couple things, see what seems most comfortable. Yeah, that looks really comfortable for you. You're going to have a really good time riding this. I think, the beginning will be tough, but he walked me through all my fears, all my doubts. I mean, this man had sold this 1,000 times before, and he was able to even accurately predict what my objections or what my doubts would be before they came out of their mouth. I mean, it felt like I was in the hands of an expert that really cared about seeing me go hit this mountain, excuse me, and have the time of my life with my friends. And like I said, this setup carried me years and years and years into the future. I even tried using other boards. A buddy of mine that I went with, his younger brother started working at this store. So he had 5, 6 boards that fit me. I tried using 3 of them. Didn't like any of them nearly as much as this one. So I even had external validation after the fact that this guy, he took real good care of me and he knew what he was talking about. So at the time, I just felt like, wow, smart man made purchase easy for Dan. Dan, go have fun now with friends. But looking back, and I don't know what type of sales training this individual may or may not have had, but they did an excellent job of hitting a lot of the key points that even, we at ClozeLoop, when we're training not only new or intermediate sellers and BDRs, but advanced folks, things that we try and refresh or make sure that are really being hammered home. This guy did so naturally. And looking back at that, I often wonder what this individual's career path might have looked like if they'd chosen to sell something else. And maybe they did years down the line. I actually don't know, but that was my probably my most memorable being sold to experience.
Well, let's start breaking that down right away because there is a lot in there. I'm going to go a little bit back to the beginning here because this was extremely profound to me. It at first started like he was going to paint this perfect rosy picture where, hey, you could just jump to the intermediate board and you can have all the designs and you can have all the boots and you can have all the jackets that you want. But then he did something very interesting is he said, hey, let me warn you about something. If
Yeah.
you hop to this intermediary, your learning curve is going to be steeper. So it wasn't just the positive side of the coin where everything's going to be great, sunshine and rainbows. You're going to get out there and you're going to have the best time of your life. He was also setting fair expectations. So how did that kind of land to you as far as a trust factor? Because obviously you didn't walk into that store fully trusting him yet.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I walked into the store off referral, right? My friends had all gone there, but they sat back and watched. They didn't help this process at all. If anything, they were just making fun of me the whole time. But yeah, when he said, listen, this is going to hurt. You play sports, right? What sports you play? Okay, rugby and lacrosse. Those are contact sports. Would you say you're pretty durable? He warmed me up for this. He set my ego up in a place to say, yeah, of course I can take this. So once he addressed that, I said, that's not something I had thought of. So instantly, he doesn't have me thinking about his sales process anymore. He's got me thinking about, oh, wow, what else am I not considering? I'm really glad he said that to me. It just made him an expert in my eyes from the beginning.
100%. I mean, once somebody teaches you something that you were not aware of, you're leaning in and you're listening that much harder. And it didn't stop there. I mean, the same exact thing happened with the gloves. 99% of people are going to think of gloves as functional in the sense of, are they keeping my hands warm? But when someone says, hey, your first couple times, you're going to be falling a lot, you're going to be on the floor, you don't want your gloves to rip through. And all of a sudden, then you remember a time, oh, shit, my gloves ripped through before, and I don't want to see that happen again. So he's steadily mixing in not only these qualification questions and discovery questions to craft exactly what you want, he's also making you aware of pitfalls along the way or potential pitfalls.
And you probably see a lot of this on LinkedIn, and a lot of really great sellers will talk about pain driving urgency far more than pleasure. And there's actually an intermediary. There's fear. So pleasure and reward drives the least amount of urgency. Pain drives the most. Fear is in the middle. Well, it was brilliant in hindsight what he did. He hedged his bets. Do you think this guy had any way of knowing that I had actually ripped open a pair of gloves before and filled my, hands with snow, and then I had to cut my day?
No way.
Saying that, the fear of it, going, oh crap, I don't want that, could be enough to drive me to make an urgent decision more than just the pleasure of how warm and how cool they are. But in the event that I had that negative experience in the past, he actually touched directly on a pain, which drove urgency to an even greater level. And this is why we talk about the importance of discovery, just asking questions, understanding what type of experience I had. From what he had heard, he probably could have inferred that I had some type of unpleasant glove experience, even if he didn't know that, maybe he did ask me if I ever ripped open a pair of gloves. To this day, I honestly can't remember. But regardless, it was from the moment he said that, no doubt in my mind, gloves are probably the second or third most important purchase for me, after board bindings and boot, the actual riding setup.
And you went and you bought everything from him. So it wasn't just somebody walks into the store, you told them, hey, I'm not really sure what I'm doing. Like you said, he could have just sold you a board and you could have been on your way, right? And he could have been a quick in and out, but he dug and he dug and he dug and he made you aware of pitfalls and, ended up walking out with a huge sale. So I think this is a perfect place to start digging up some takeaways for B2B sellers. For the B2B sellers that are listening, the AEs that are closing deals, what can they take out of this into their everyday role, Dan?
What I like to think right off the bat is, and this is stuff we've probably all heard before. I'm not breaking new ground here. The amount of information you receive determines your ability to close deals, and your status is the wrong word, but almost your quality as a seller. I did most of the talking. He asked me very specific and very prescriptive questions. So that's where I would go ahead and say, excuse me for a second. Come on, buddy, don't do that. This is where I would go ahead and say, proper discovery makes or breaks deals. I could have come in there and he could have asked me the right questions and realized that I was just I'm sorry. I hope this
sponsored by Shrek.
Yeah, sponsored by Shrek, ripping the cushions in the house I've lived in for now 3 days. Great start. So when you do this proper discovery, you can make or break a deal. He could have found out I came in, I was tire kicking, I had a $300 budget, and said, listen, you're better off getting a used board online, finding out if you even like the sport, and then if you do, come back and we'll talk to you. But he asked so many questions and understand exactly what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go, that my motivations were social. I really cared about doing this thing with my friends. That was really important to me, that he knew I came in with the intention of making some type of purchase. So if you're doing the majority of the talking in the early stage of the deal, you are missing out on very, very critical information that would allow you to be prescriptive at the end of the deal, like this individual was. And if you're not addressing potential pitfalls in the beginning, I mean, something that someone said to me that's stuck years now has been, run towards resistance because you can't run away from it. Hey, are you prepared to spend a little bit more money up front? Just want to let you know, you might have a less than pleasant experience going with this intermeeting setup. Is that a deterrent to you? He ran towards my potential resistances and we got them out of the way right from the beginning, so that when it came to the end and he could be prescriptive. Okay, so the next steps are for us to get you sized, make sure everything feels good. Here's what we're going to check for. And then we can get you out of here and on your way. You can come back tomorrow if you'd like to pick up the setup once we put it all together. He was able to be hyper prescriptive because I wouldn't have to go, hang on a sec, I got to go check my budget. We talked about that. Hang on a second, I got to make sure that I'm actually going to be able to make it to the mountains. I already said I bought a pass.
Right.
We got that out of the way early on.
I love it. What I would even say on top of that is that he wasn't just interrogating you with questions to qualify his deal. He was asking you the questions positioned in a way in which it was helping to curate your perfect experience. So, I mean, this is obviously so applicable to a daily sales role in so many ways. Dan, this has been amazing. This is probably a perfect place to cut it before we start babbling on and losing the rest of the audience. Why don't you plug something before we hop off?
Yeah. So, I don't know if I necessarily have too much to plug on ClozeLoop. But recently ClozeLoop, we did spin out a software product that goes along with our consulting. I'm not going to plug away at it. If you want to check coachcrm.com online, check it out. I will say the reason we did this is what we noticed was, economy's not where it was half a year ago. And as such, a lot of deals were stalling out. And with folks being hybrid and remote working, it's become a lot more challenging for managers to go in and influence these deals, give immediate feedback the way they could when we were all on a sales floor. But at the end of the day, we still all have revenue goals that we have to hit. We're looking for competitive advantage to do so. So because of those frustrations that we heard from folks in the industry, we built out Coach CRM. And if these are any things that might resonate or something that you're just curious to learn a little bit more about, reach out to me, Daniel Berger, on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. I'm just happy to have a conversation from a consultative point, not from a sales point, and point you in the right direction if you'd like to learn more.
Coach CRM, find Daniel Berger on LinkedIn. Make sure you shoot him a message if you're curious. That is a wrap. Thank you all so much for hanging with us. We will see you next week. Thanks again.